You know, as you heard, my background is in politics, government, and in business. And I'm much more used to talking about things like investment strategies and so forth. And a big part of what we're trying to do with the Haven Project is to create jobs so that people can recover their villages and so forth. So that's kind of my bailiwick. And I think, gosh, what we're discussing today is trauma and pain. And I'm not sure I'm qualified. But maybe the thing that qualifies me, if anything, is that I'm the father of a big family. I have 6 daughters. I have 7 sons. And the pain that these people have suffered is beyond words. We're going to talk about something that's unspeakable, right? So we should all put ourselves in their shoes. And I want to say before we really begin that it is really a privilege to be in the company of this much courage. In the face of inhumanity, of barbarism, both of these stories that we're going to hear are remarkable for their kind of calm and courageous and sometimes just loving response to inhumanity. So I'm hoping, I know we're running behind and we're trying to run through and there's a lot to say. I'm hoping that there is time for audience questions at the end. So keep those in mind as we go through. Here on my immediate right is Samia Sleiman. She's 15. In August 2014, when she was 13, she and 1,000 Yazidi women and girls were abducted and sold at market as sex slaves by ISIS. Samia had the courage and the luck to escape 6 months later, and she lives in Germany with her mother and her brother now. Her translator, Abid, is the director of government relations and outreach for Yazda organization, which is an organization, a U.S. NGO, that helps Yazidis respond to the genocide and recover from the genocide. Marcia and Carl Mueller from Prescott, Arizona, are the parents of Kayla Mueller. Kayla was an aid worker in Turkey who was helping Syrian refugees for 9 months before she went to assist a technician who was installing some equipment at a Doctors Without Borders hospital in Aleppo, Syria. On the way back, a few days before her 25th birthday, she was abducted by ISIS and enslaved. For 18 months, she was tortured. She was brutalized many times by the head of ISIS himself, until eventually she was killed. ISIS claims that she was killed by a Jordanian airstrike, and that's often reported in the media, but her parents' investigations suggest that's just another ISIS lie. So we're going to begin. Does the microphone work yet? Does she have one that works? Excellent.
Yeah,
great.
Good.
We're going to begin with Samia telling her story.
Okay, Samia. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here to listen to my story. My name is Samia Suleiman. I am 15 years old. As a Yazidi, on August 3rd, 2014, ISIS attacked our areas in Sinjar and they took over all of the Yazidi homeland. They surrounded my village just like all the other Yazidi villages, and they took me and my family as hostages along with thousands of other Yazidis.
عائلة دقت كرن مرداني نشاقة كي دسولنجي وان شداندن وتقالك السكناندن.
When they took us, they separated families. They separated women and girls and young boys and children from men, and they handcuffed and tied all the men, and they took them to another place.
جنو زارو برن قلق جهة.
They took most of the women and girls to their headquarters and places in Mosul and the other areas.
از دوانزده مها دستی آدم. شش مها دوانزده روز دستی آدم.
I was in captivity with ISIS for 6 months and 12 days.
الخلالة فان شش مها دوانزده روجات هاتنا نفما قيشت برن قيشي هفت صالي برن راتبونا شنيت عمر المزن.
During my time in captivity, we faced horrible situation in ISIS hands. They sold and raped the Yazidi girls as young as 7 and 8 years old.
إيش أسبوعي بينش تقا خوارن تانين بترنا بخوارنا وانجي أوجي يا قليل بنازل.
They tortured people. They made them starve in their. They hold us in schools and other places.
أس بهزاري إز ديارة أمبرنا قلق جها.
When in captivity, I was being relocated with other Yazidi girls and sold out constantly to other ISIS members.
روجامش داكام قطبكن أبليدان أبصوندا أبقري.
They forced me to be separated. They forced me to be separated from my mother, and they beat my mother in front of me.
داكام بير قوقيجامش من نبن بورورا كدنا سرسري ويدا.
My grandmother was with us also, and she resisted. She tried to keep me with her, but one of ISIS members hit her with a weapon on her head.
قن هيوان هرب داكام بير نهات هرز جوان قط كرم.
But they did not care about anything like that. They forced us to be separated, so I was taken from my family.
أس صديقي شيء إزدير أز المدرسة كده بوم.
I was being held with hundreds of Yazidi girls in a school.
الخلالة أوي فدريدا أتهانا نف مقيجت إزديا راتبونا ما أما اختصابت كرن خوارنا جفل دانا ما.
During that time, I've seen. I was not the only one that had been tortured and raped, but all these Yazidi girls faced the same thing I faced, and there are still many in captivity facing the same thing.
أم قيجي إزديا أم فرونا يكود ترهدي.
ISIS members even gave us as gifts to each other, not even sold us to each other.
قيجت إزديا عمري هراك تشتري عمري هفت سال بون اختصابت كرن يا عمري 40 سال.
How can human beings do this and enslave and rape young girls in 8 and 9 years old?
بهزاري إزديا كشتن بهزاري ميرا كشتنت إزدي.
During that attack, ISIS killed thousands of Yazidi men. They enslaved, like I said, thousands of Yazidi girls and young boys.
يكي داعش عمري 5 سال هم وسفرود ما يكي عمري 6 سال.
I remember being sold from one ISIS member that was around 50 years old to another one that was even older than him.
ويزش خورا برموس اختصاب كرم بشغلكي تشبي شروي شغليناكي.
These old ISIS men kept us at their house as sex slaves and spoils of war, and they violated our body.
أصدم هالمالاوي دمهم أبتعب أبرزالت اختصاب كرن دستولين جيمت شدان دون لهات أبا مو شغلة مخراكر.
The last guy I was sold to, I was with him for his house for 2 months, and I faced horrible things at his hand.
طبعا أسناب تنيبون بهزاري قيجي إزديا مربون إشمك جكتر جيبون بيوختي دا.
And this is not what I only faced. The other Yazidi girls younger than me faced the same destiny.
فان داكي ما إزديا فيت مزنا في كيري زواج نتهاتن رابونت كشتن.
And I've seen the older Yazidi women that killed them because they didn't want them as sex slaves, because they don't want the older women, they just killed them.
زاروی ئێزدای کچێکی عمرێوی 4 ساڵ هەتا 7 ساڵی ئژداکات برن و برنا معسکرا شێر پێتکردن.
As for the Yazidi boys, the younger ones, 6 and 7 years old and older than that, they took them to ISIS camps in Syria and other places to train them and brainwash them.
پشتیوان هەردوومەها ئەسفەکریم گۆ لازم ئەس اختیارکەش خۆرە بمس خەلاص ببم.
So after all that, I've been constantly thinking, I thought that I have to escape and find a way to get away from this.
ئەس برمە مووسلس دو ئوسبوع المالەکەی دەمام.
And the last one I was with for 2 weeks at one of ISIS houses in Mosul.
دەسوولنگێمێ ئەتشداندن ئلوێ مالێدا بەس چما ئانێزنگی جێکی بوس خەلاص ببم.
Because they knew I was thinking about that and they were always watching me, so it was really hard for me to escape.
مەلابسێ شەبابە من بەرخۆکردن میشعفا خوژێ کرد من سەمسووکە خوڕیا خۆم چێ کرد و مبازدا.
So one day I thought, okay, what should I do? I found some of the boys' clothes in that house, and I cut my hair and I put a hat on to escape from that house.
ساعت 6 سبێ ئەس دەرکەتم هەتا 6:30 ئێوارس مستەمر ڕزت مەشیم سەرمدە تاوا بارانی بوو.
So I escaped early in the morning, around 6 o'clock in the morning, and I just kept walking and walking in Mosul in those neighborhoods because I looked like a boy. They just left me alone.
من تەکسیەکی سەکنان مخاویتە بەختێوی من گۆ مبگینە جهەکی خێرێ.
Finally, I just waved at a cab driver, and he stopped, and I got in that taxi.
وی زلامی مسعدانم کرد وزبرمە ماڵە خۆ.
That guy happened not to be with ISIS, and he helped me escape. He took me to his house.
هەویەکام چێ کرد وسانیمە کوردستان.
Yeah, he made me an ID, a fake ID with a different name, and helped me escape from Mosul to Kurdistan.
بەڵێ ڕاستە ئەس خەلاص بووم بەس هیچ ئەب هەزاری قیچێتمە ئێزدیا حالياً هاتنها 3000 هیچ دەستێمە دەمانە قیچێتمە ئێزدیا ئی مەختوف.
I know I was lucky to be able to escape, but thousands of Yazidi girls are still, we estimate the numbers to be around over 3,000 in captivity still.
ئەفقیچ هەمە اختصاب کردن شغڵا پیس بوان ڕەکردن طەڵبات دین المەکردن سەردینێ خوچنم نمێژە قورئانی بخواندن.
They forced them to convert to Islam. They forced them to convert to Islam, and they tortured them and sell them to each other.
ئەس گەلێک مەمنوناوەمە و هەمچکە عەساوی قسێ کرد.
Thank you so much, everyone, for listening to me.
Thank you, Samia. Just in awe of your courage to risk your life like that, to dress up and to try to escape. Can you tell us a little about some of those friends and relatives of yours you left behind? And are you ever able to get any news of them? Okay, here.
حالياً هاتنها 45 شخص خويت بابم هاتنها دەستێوان دەنهیش.
45 people from my relatives and immediate family of my dad and mom are still in captivity.
بەڵێ بابێ میژی و باپیرێم و مامێم هەرچی.
My father, my grandfather, and my uncle are in captivity still. We don't know anything about them.
هەتا ڕێژە ئیرۆ متشکیشوان نەبیستە.
Till today, we haven't heard a word about them. We have no idea where they ended up.
بەڵێ ئیرۆ ڕاستە ئەس بەرم باب و مامێ قاتم بەس ئەس بەر هەزاری ئێزدیا کاتم و هەزاری ئێزدیا کوشتن ئێخسیر کردن دەروبەر کردن.
But they're not the only ones. There are thousands of Yazidi families that are still waiting for their loved ones that are missing and are still in captivity.
Thank you so much.
Abid, could you tell us a little bit about, just briefly, if we could put the website up there, I think we have it, about your organization and what you're doing here in the United States to help the Yazidi community.
Yazda is a Yazidi organization. I'm one of the co-founders. I established this organization along with a group of my friends in the U.S. We were all former interpreters and advisors for the U.S. Army in Iraq. Myself, I worked for the Army for 5 years in Iraq to help them during the war. So when we came here, we were studying, going to school, and have jobs. We didn't do anything of this work before August 3rd of 2014. But when ISIS came, so we realized that we needed to do something. So we established this organization, and we have been in contact with State Department, other NGOs, and other governments around the world to advocate for the Yazidi community. We do reports on mass graves that we found in the areas that are liberated. We estimate the number of the Yazidis still in captivity over 3,000. We think that about 1,200 young boys are still in captivity being trained. About 2,800 Yazidi women have managed to escape or survived ISIS. And so we're providing, what we do is provide psychosocial treatment for the Yazidi girls and women that escaped ISIS. We have mobile clinics and health centers in Iraq that provide health care for the displaced people. We have cultural preservation programs to help the Yazidis and Christians preserve their cultures and provide all sorts of information that is needed in that area.
That's great. That's wonderful. And we should always praise the UN when it does something good. I understand you recently got a UN grant.
Yes, we've been receiving mainly donations from people online, and with that money we used to help girls like Samia. They're still in Iraq. Luckily, Samia was able, along with a group of 1,000 Yazidi girls, to immigrate to Germany and receive help from the German government. But there are still a lot of people who survived ISIS and others in these camps that need help. So we provide them with cash, health treatment and trauma treatment in our centers in Iraq, and we use that money for that. But we recently, like you said, we received grants from other organizations and one from the UN to help Yazidis go back and get jobs and rebuild their areas.
That's terrific. And the website, I believe, is yazda.org. Is that
It's
correct?
yazda.org,
That's terrific.
yazda.org.
That's great. Marcia, if I believe you have a letter from, before sort of going into the fuller version of the story, of her story, Marcia's going to read a letter from Kayla.
Yes, this letter came out in April of 2014. Kayla was taken on August 4th, 2013. This letter was smuggled out because she didn't want us to know the demands that were made upon her. So the people that brought the letter out told us that she was given a life sentence in retaliation for Afia Siddiqui, who had an 86-year sentence here in our country. And this is what she says: "Everyone, if you're receiving this letter, it means I am still detained, but my cellmates, starting from February 11th, 2014, have been released. I have asked them to contact you and send you this letter. It's hard to know what to say. Please know that I am in a safe location, completely unharmed and healthy, put on weight, in fact. I have been treated with the utmost respect and kindness. I wanted to write you all a well-thought-out letter, but I didn't know if my cellmates would be leaving in the coming days or the coming months, restricting my time, but primarily I could only write the letter a paragraph at a time. Just the thought of all of you sends me into a fit of tears. If you could say I have suffered at all throughout this whole experience, it is only in knowing how much suffering I have put you all through. I will never ask you to forgive me, as I do not deserve forgiveness. I remember Mom always telling me that all in all, in the end, the only one you really have is God. I have come to a place in this experience where in every sense of the word, I have surrendered myself to our Creator, because literally there was no one else. And by God and by your prayers, I have felt tenderly cradled in free fall. I have been shown in darkness light and have learned that even in prison, one can be free. I am grateful. I have come to see that there is good in every situation. Sometimes we just have to look for it. I pray each day that if nothing else, you have felt a certain closeness and surrender to God as well, and have formed a bond of love and support amongst one another. I miss you all as if it has been a decade of forced separation. I have had many a long hour to think of all the things I will do with Lex, our first family camping trip, the first meeting at the airport. I have had many hours to think how only in your absence have I finally, at 25 years old, come to realize your place in my life, the gift that is each one of you, and the person I could and could not be if you were not a part of my life, my family, my support. I do not want the negotiations for my release to be your duty. If there is any other option, take it, even if it takes more time. This should never have become your burden. I have asked these women to support you. Please seek their advice. If you have not done so already, blank can contact blank, who may have a certain level of experience with these people. None of us could have known it would be this long, but know I am also fighting for my side in the ways I am able, and I have a lot of fight left inside of me. I am not breaking down, and I will not give in no matter how long it takes. I wrote a song some months ago that says, "The part of me that pains the most also gets me out of bed. Without your hope, there could be nothing left." In other words, the thought of your pain is the source of my own. Simultaneously, the hope of our reunion is the source of my strength. Please be patient, give your pain to God. I know you would want me to remain strong. That is exactly what I am doing. Do not fear for me, continue to pray as will I, and by God's will, we will be together soon. All my everything, Kayla. And I think I want to say that this would have been in February of 2014 or March. We now know that from August to before she went to this prison in Raqqa, she was in Aleppo. Her head was shaved, her fingernails were pulled out, and she was beaten. So for her to be able to write this kind of a letter, something else I want you to know too, because a lot of people say, how could she say she was safe and unharmed? For one thing, she didn't want us to worry about her. And even though she was being held in this prison by a lot of foreign fighters, Jihadi John, a lot of foreign fighters, there were still Syrian guards that were paid to watch these people, and some of them were kind. We were told that Kayla had been writing all along, and someone had been kind to her, and Jihadi John came in and picked up her notes and said, "Who is this person?" He was going to kill him or punish him for being kind to her. When she acted like she couldn't remember who he was, and when that man left, she shredded all of her notes that she had been taking so that anything else that she had written that might have been a kindness to anyone would not get them hurt.
Thank you so much. Carl, maybe you could tell us a bit about why Kayla was there in the first place. Why did she go to Turkey to help Syrian refugees? Why did she go to Aleppo? What motivated her?
Well, what motivated Kayla was, and I'll quote Bertrand Russell, she had a unbearable pity for the suffering of mankind, and that's what took her there. She always helped, even when she was in junior high, high school, college. She graduated in 2.5 years with her degree while working at the county jail, teaching anger management to some of the Native American women there. Her list of accomplishments in volunteerism is very, very lengthy. That was her life's work. As she said in one of her quotes, "I've known for some time what my life's work is, using my hands to relieve suffering." She worked in India in an orphanage, southern India. She moved to northern India and worked with Tibetan refugees. The Syrian people, once she ended up in Turkey working with an NGO there, and the Syrian people just so touched her, and they were being brutalized so terribly that she couldn't not help. She had to go, and she had to do what she could do, and she tried to tell the world. And I like to say she was like a small voice in the forest, and nobody was there to hear it. Nobody would listen. I would like to say that 2 days ago, Kayla got to speak to the world through us at the UN. I want to thank Citizens Go for setting that up and bringing us here to this Congress.
And Marcia and Carl, what do you think that Kayla would want us to know about the situation on the ground? We get the idea, I mean, obviously people are suffering, and she was suffering among the most unimaginable things, but what would she want us to do about it, do you think?
Well, when actually Kayla came home in May of 2013 and talked with Carl's Kiwanis group, and Kayla couldn't figure out at that time why we weren't doing anything. That was 3 years ago. She had followed this. She had met a friend from Syria in 2010. So when the revolution, actually before the revolution, just the people trying to gain their freedom, I guess, she was being kept in touch with this person telling her all of this. And then when the war started, like Carl said, she just had to go. And I think she just saw through different eyes than most people do. She could see suffering, and she just didn't understand why people weren't helping. And I guess now I don't understand why we aren't helping. Where have we been? As Kayla would cry with these women who would say, you know, you're an American. Where is America? And she said all she could do was cry with them. So.
Before I want to take questions from the audience in just a moment, but I'd like if you could tell, I thought the most moving thing that I read about her was a story of a journalist who wrote about how serene and how I don't want to say resigned, because that's not a generous word, but how calm and strong in the face of knowing that she was very by the end she knew that she was very unlikely ever to come home, and yet she was such an inspiration to others. Can you tell that story?
Well, one of the French journalists, because the French got all their people out, called us soon after. He said he only got to see Kayla for 5 or 10 minutes, and he said that she was an amazing young woman, and he needed to call us to let us know how strong she was. When the women that she was with 3 women who also were gotten out by their company. And so when they had left, at that time, that's when this letter I just read was written. And in that letter, I think Kayla felt that she was going to come home. But those women, then she didn't hear anything from anyone. So then when the French were leaving, I think she was getting the idea that maybe we weren't going to be able to get her home. And Nicholas Hennon said that she was brought down to his cell. Of course, she's completely covered, but she was able to drop her face mask to speak to them, and she spoke fluent French, so she was really able to speak with the Frenchmen. And he said that Kayla just talked to them, told her story. He said she was very beautiful, she was very strong. And because she looked and said such powerful words, Jihadi John, who was with her, said to make them, I think, look bad, look at this woman, look how powerful she is and how she can talk, giving it to Allah, God. And Kayla turned to him and said, just very kindly, I'm sorry, sir, but I have not converted. And Nicholas Hennon said no one would speak to Jihadi John like this, but he said Kayla did. She made it very clear. She repeated herself, "I'm sorry, but I have not converted." Nicholas told us that it brought tears to the men in the cell when they heard how strong and powerful she truly was.
It's remarkable. It's remarkable. I'd like to take questions. If there are folks with microphones who are coming around to take the questions. To make it go, because we'd like to get, I'm sure that there are many people who would like to ask questions. What I'd like to do is take them kind of 3 at a time. So when you ask your question, direct it to a particular panelist, if you like, and then we'll move on and we'll take 3, and then the panelists will answer, and then we'll take 3 more. So who has a question? No questions? Back there.
For Samia, you both spoke about the forgiveness by Yazidis. It's so hard for me to imagine you forgiving, but I want to know what forgiveness has looked like for you.
Great, that's 1. 2 more? Okay, while you're thinking of questions, because I know you have them, we're going to let, getting a little translation up here right now, we're going to let Samia answer that question about forgiveness.
إيزيدي ملتكي بلنغازا إيزيدي بشتي وهاب سري إيزيدي هاتي أبزحمت إيزيدي سرخراب النوب نو.
The Yazidi people are always been peaceful, and I'm sure many of them are going to be able to forgive, but we hope that we will get some help to be able to stand on our feet.
Great, more questions? Yes, sir. Let's use it, because it's being recorded here. If you could use a microphone, that'd be helpful here.
I would like to thank the young lady for coming and sharing her story. I think it's amazing, and I think you're amazing. That's one. That's just a comment. For you guys, what do you think you would do differently, or what would you advise to someone that would be in your situation today if their child was being held right now?
This pains me to say this, but I would advise them not to trust the U.S. government to get their loved one out. We put all our faith in our government to get Kayla home, however it could be done. And as it turns out, the only option that was ever on the table was a rescue attempt. They never had reliable intelligence on where they were. Most people have heard the story, but we were told if we paid ransom, we could be prosecuted. Of course, where are we going to come up with $6.2 million? You know, and then at one point, the people that had that kind of money, that were willing to help and would have helped, were also told they could be prosecuted. So they slammed that door. We traveled to Qatar to talk to the government over there in December and to beg them to help us. However, you know, they're known for getting people out. We met with several officials there, and the last official that we met with came into the room, introduced himself, and he said, "I just got off the phone with John Kerry, and we do not pay ransom." And they slam doors like that on us constantly. The negotiations that we had with ISIS, 20 emails. We were coached by the FBI, and every one was just a stall tactic. We were never advised to make an offer. You know, even with all we had, just to make an offer. We were never advised to do that. They just stalled. And at one point, I even said, if I was getting these emails back, it would anger me. And it did anger them. Some of the emails we received back were very threatening. We traveled to Istanbul during the whole process and spoke with a person off of a crisis management team, a person that does this kind of negotiations, and he looked at the emails that we'd been sending, and he just wiped his face like this. He says, "You haven't been negotiating, you've been communicating." And throughout the 18 months, that's what our government did for us. They communicated with ISIS, I believe, to try to find possibly where they were. They finally did do a raid, too late. They had moved all of the people from that particular prison before they conducted that raid.
Could I just add to that? I think it's important for people to know, too, that from the very beginning, Kayla was taken August 4th. On August 27th, there was a 10-second video put out about her. It was her asking for help. A couple of months later, we got more news about Kayla, a woman in Turkey that Kayla was helping help refugees, got a voicemail of Kayla saying, "I'm dying, I need help." That woman tried to contact the consulate in Turkey and no one wanted to talk to her. And then in February we heard from some women that got out, and then then we hear from the Frenchmen getting out, and then our emails start with ISIS. They started in May, they went through the end of September. About September 19th was our last one. And ISIS was following what our government was doing. We went to DC in May of 2014. When we returned, the president released 4 prisoners for Bergdahl. As soon as we get home, we get a message from ISIS saying, "We're asking 1 for 1. Your president just released 4 for 1. So all of our emails after the raid, which the government told us they didn't do a raid, I get a message on July 13th from ISIS saying you have 30 days to give us what we're asking or your daughter will be killed. So we had a 30-day window, which really nothing was done in that 30 days either, but she wasn't killed. 3 days later, they beheaded James Foley, and then it just kept going from there. So it was almost as if ISIS was saying, "Take this girl, please take her." And instead, we spent enormous amounts of money on everything else instead of saving our children. And another thing I'd like to say about the foreign minister in Qatar, when he told us that Secretary Kerry, he just got off the phone and they don't pay ransom, he looked out the window and he said to us, "I don't understand you Americans. We believe if you can save one soul, it's worth trying."
I think we have time for one more question, or we're over time, but yes.
Hi, as you had extensive contact in the Islamic world during this time,
When Kayla was taken, ISIS wasn't really known of at the time. In fact, the Syrian that did get out, when we asked him who has her, he said it's the Islamic. He said it's ISIS, and I said, "What is that?" And he says it's the Islamic State of Iraq and Sham. And by other aid workers, then they stopped. They realized then that they were going to start being taken, because up until then it was the Assad regime and the Syrian Free Army, yes, and they wanted the aid workers' help. So it wasn't until this foreign group comes in, they didn't care about the Syrians, they didn't care about either side really, so they didn't care about the aid workers either, and that's when they started taking them.
Throughout that 18 months, we were told by ISIS not to go to the media. We were told by the NGOs, by our government, not to go to the media. So these organizations that you speak of didn't have a chance to really reach out to us. However, towards the end, the family of Afia Siddiqui, the Pakistani woman that's in prison in Texas, actually wrote us a letter to send to the Islamic State, saying that they didn't want Kayla hurt and they shouldn't be doing this. There was another Islamic organization. Last year at the American Human Rights Council in Dearborn, Michigan, the largest Muslim community in the country. I'll be speaking there the 11th of this month as well again. We spoke in Orlando at the Syrian American Medical Society's annual banquet, and we've met many, many good Muslim people that are trying to help their people back in Syria and Iraq and all over in the Middle East. The Syrian American Medical Society was amazing. We sat in a room with probably 350 doctors, and I think it was an hour and 45 minutes, 2 hours. They raised $1.3 million, I think it was, just by raising their hand. I will give so much, I will give so much. And then they actually go and do, and they provide medical services in Syria, which is getting, as we all know, extremely dangerous right now.
Well, I just, one more time, if we could all just honor, people all the time say it's courageous to speak out, and I don't have a lot of patience for that. But in this case, what these families have been through, what these individuals have been through, is very painful, very personal, and it is an act of courage to speak about it. And they do this because of those left behind. And so if you could just join me in honoring them for being so brave and so wonderful. Thank you.